May 11th, 2024. Well, today I want to get into the issue that's been raised by some revelations that came out of a Stephen Greenstreet interview of Sean Kirkpatrick of the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or I should say formally of it. And this seems to kind of shifting our situation on the UAP subject a little bit. Um, because a lot of people have been fairly critical of the report that the AARO actually issued on the subject, which is supposed to be the history of the government's involvement in the subject, which was very, pretty much, very almost nothing yet that people that study the subject didn't already know, which means there's no revolution, which is to say there really is nothing there, right? That's essentially what they're trying to say. Um, you know, so let's kind of get into this a little bit. What the issue is, because Greenstreet, who's become a very much of a critic, I think, of the UAP subject and the people involved in it. Um, at any rate, it got into the question of the Skinwalker Ranch and Brandon Fugal and so forth, because apparently in 2018. Uh, Brandon Fugal and his team and some other individuals that had been associated with the OSOP program and so forth, and others, I guess, had a briefing for some Senate staffers in Washington, D.C. And essentially, what was interesting here is in the interview, uh, uh, if Greenstreet asked a couple of interesting questions. One was, did he have association with a variety of people that are known to be involved in this subject prior to that? And the other thing which was much more important, was did he attend this meeting, of which he basically kind of denies that he was at such a meeting on the Skinwalker Ranch. And then he kind of fumbles around and says, well, maybe it was actually in 2017 and so forth. And it wasn't on that subject. It was more on an OSOP or something to that effect. So, but at any rate, what turns out is, of course, is that Fugal actually had some pictures taken there, and clearly Sean Kirkpatrick is at the meeting. And of course, what was always notable about that meeting, as Fugal had had discussed earlier, was the fact that at some point in the thing, Kirkpatrick had interrupted allegedly and said something to the effect of, "Don't spend any time trying to prove that UFOs exist. We're all aware of the UFO reality." And so, and so, ironically enough, now there's nothing to see in UFOs and has this completely negative report, which, first of all, I mean, of course, the UFO advocates are going off, ridiculing them and saying really not friendly things about them on X and so forth. I mean, I've seen this. However, I think what's interesting about this whole subject is, why was he brought in there? What's his connection? Well, let's look at some of the other people there. Was James Lukatsky, who was the head guy on OSOP, basically, which is the thing that got all this going, that had the $22 million of funding that had been arranged with certain senators and so forth, that led to all the things that have occurred, basically the whole breakout of the subject in the recent years. And of course, I agree with that there have been some misstatements made by various people that weren't literally precisely accurate, and we can get into that kind of thing. But the fact he denied he was at the meeting, and what's interesting is that he'd said this at the meeting. Now you have to look at a little bit what might be indicated by that. Um, you know, one thing I'd like to point out is that since Lukatsky was there, and I think Hal Puthoff was there, I believe, and some other people, and of course you have the Skinwalker people are there. Basically it was a UFO positive group of people, let's say. So why would he go ahead and make this admission? Because basically my theory is he didn't want to waste any time. He was there for a purpose. And I'll try to explain what I think that purpose was. But first, to show that how I think, for instance, let's take a look at Lukatsky, and I think this is something people ought to bear in mind. And I find it amazing how much this seems to be kind of ignored. I know it was a big point was made on one of the weaponized videos, uh, by Knapp and and Corbell, but nonetheless, I like to kind of bring this to some people's attention here. So here's what I have to read for you here real quick. In the book that Lukatsky is a co-author of, basically he makes a statement in chapter 9, which has to be watched very carefully. And remember, this book went through the DOPSA review process for security. It says, at the conclusion of a 2011 meeting in the Capitol building with a U.S. Senator and an agency undersecretary, Lukatsky, the only one of this author's books present, posed a question. Okay, that's a statement. He stated this is the point. He stated that the United States was in possession of a craft of unknown origin and had successfully gained access to its interior. This craft had a streamlined configuration suitable for aerodynamic flight, but no intakes, exhaust, wings, or control surfaces. In fact, it appeared to not have an engine, fuel tanks, or fuel. Lukatsky asked, now this is where it gets into a question. Up to this point, everything he's saying is a statement, not a question. He then asked a question, what is the purpose of this craft? Was it a life support craft used only for atmospheric reentry, or what? If it was a spacecraft, then how did it operate? Now, my theory is that how Lukatsky got this through the DOPSA review process is that since the whole thing ended in a question, it's all kind of jumbled together. But there's some clear statements in this, which implies one thing: like Lukatsky actually apparently has positive knowledge of UAP recovery. And he seems to have, I guess, firsthand knowledge, at least of the results of the study. If he didn't actually see the craft, at least he apparently saw the report of the craft or has been briefed on it. So he sort of has firsthand knowledge in a pretty serious way, I think, of this subject. So, and what I'm thinking is, presumably Hal Puthoff has a lot of knowledge, but isn't exactly first. He's pretty close too, and so forth. So what I'm kind of thinking is, I don't believe Puthoff is actually in the program, although he might be, but I don't know. That's a more complex subject. But I'm getting the feeling that Sean Kirkpatrick was there representing the program. That's my perception. That was why he was there, and why would the program want him to be in that meeting? Because they're curious about what's going on at Skinwalker. Because they are suspicious that there's a potential recovery at Skinwalker, that there's some kind of a craft base or object underneath that mesa, if you've been following the Skinwalker program, that would be of interest to the program, okay? And I think that was why he was sent there, to collect that information. Now, later on, and remember, at that time, it wasn't... he probably had no conception, nor did the people he was working for have any conception, that he one day would be head of a group called AARO, which would be supposedly to study this subject and probably having the hidden mission of covering things up, right? He probably had no suspicion that would be a future assignment he was going to inherit. So he's just there to, get the scoop on what Mr. Fugal was doing at Skinwalker. Okay, so anyway, by the way, if you like these videos, please give me a like. I'm looking for more subscriptions, and of course I also post on Rumble as well if you're not on YouTube. So anyway, so yeah, this is so my thinking is, if you look at the project's point of view, here you have a fairly wealthy individual, Fugal, who owns this ranch, and now it's sort of maybe slipping out of their control, and they just want to know what's going on there. I think that's kind of it. I mean, it's going to be pretty hard for them to go in and extract anything, and if there's anything to extract. But that's a theory, at least I have. It's a theory, but and so I think that explains what's going on. But now that he's on the other side of the fence, his basic attitude is, well, let's just deny this thing. And I don't know whether he was aware that this would come out or not, but I mean, it does look like he might have noticed the picture being taken or not. I don't know. At any rate, he's left AARO, and I think he's got a job with a private with a contractor that works with a government contractor, but no longer a government employee. I think part of his assignment may have been, okay, do this job for us, and then you can retire and go off in the private industry, and somebody else will take it from here. Mission accomplished. And maybe this is not a task that he necessarily relishes, but it's one that he's been assigned to do, I think. Kind of and that's my theory anyhow. And so I think that's what's come up here. And of course, since Fugal has the evidence, and it's pretty clear cut, he denied that it was a presentation about Skinwalker, yet the Skinwalker presentation and the picture is clearly on the screen. With Fugal's making the presentation. So I get the feeling that he's kind of got caught up in this whole thing. I don't know what happens next, but clearly his idea that it was 17 or he wasn't there, those are clearly wrong. I know that a couple of snipers on the other side are trying to say, but spin words around this way and that, but that's kind of irrelevant, really. The real point was the fact that he denied being there, denied having a Skinwalker briefing, and now it's pretty clear cut he's not telling the truth. And he's probably not telling the truth about other things about the UAP subject. I think that the AARO has turned into basically kind of an updated blue book type project, or or a little bit like the Condon study. I mean, it's another debunking effort to shut the thing down. It got out of control, and it needs to be shut down from the point of view of the insiders in the program. I think that the program, I'm referring to the official people that for a long time have been actually studying and retrieving these objects. And so anyhow, and so that I think that they've been kind of caught up in this. I don't know that it'll lead to anything particularly. I suspect that Kirkpatrick will probably try to drop out of sight on the subject and not give any more interviews. I'm guessing we'll see, because I don't see how he disproves this at all. And he was trying to deny he had any knowledge or association with the people involved in all this stuff either, but obviously they're all there and know each other. I think even David Grush, I think, knew of Kirkpatrick before in security circles. And of course, it's always kind of interesting who's on the inside and who's not on this subject. That's why I will be a little bit on the question of Putoff. I'm not sure. There's some of these people I think have been involved in a variety of government programs and studies, but they may or may not really be on the true inside. I mean, and even if you're on part of the inside, you may not be on all of it. There probably are layers in this sort of thing. Based on my knowledge of how you kind of structure these kind of special access programs, there's often sub-programs that even people who are on the most well-known part of the program, would not know what the sub carve-outs are, so to speak. So, at any rate, whatever. I think it's kind of fascinating, and I think we'll have to see what comes next on this. But I think this is a major blow against AARO's credibility. Let's put it that way. And I think when you're structuring something like AARO, I think it's always important to put somebody at a prominent role in the program who knows what needs to be kept quiet and what needs to be brought forward. And it seems like that they're kind of basically doing that, and we'll see what happens next. But the one thing I don't expect is they're going to is trying to reveal anything that we're really interested in. I think they will, keep keep going in the direction of trying to explain away everything. And they may very well embarrass themselves because there's so much more knowledge out nowadays, and there's so much more skepticism. And you have members of Congress that are openly skeptical of what they're saying. And I think in previous efforts back, back in the 1960s when they were putting the kibosh on everything then, I don't think there was a whole lot of that. So at any rate, that's about all I have on this for now, but I think it's a very interesting development. I had to make my comment. So I'll, of course, be posting this on YouTube and Rumble, and, of course, the addresses of my social media accounts are in the description below.